Good morning. We did that in reverse, but that's okay. Welcome to Horizon Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Steve Daniel. I'm one of the worship associates here. We're so glad to have you with us here today, as it's a particularly special day for us, for some of our graduating high school seniors, so we're glad to have you here. It's whether you're joining us either in person or virtually. And whether you're here for the first time or if you've been coming here longer than you can remember, here at Horizon we welcome people of all faiths or of no particular faith. And whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey, you're welcome among us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lauren Daniel, and I am the Director of Lifespan Religious Education, and I'm also one of five circle coordinators here at Horizon. So I'm saying that because I have a special invitation for you. After worship today, we're going to be saying goodbye to one of our circle coordinators who is moving to North Carolina, Peter Hendy, and Lynn Hendy, who has done so much here and is just leaving as our community garden manager. So we want to invite you to a reception for them after service out over here under the pergola. And I also was asked to make a quick announcement. You know, our auction is going on till at least noon today, and you all have been doing wonderful. Here, I'm pulling it up. Let's see. My goodness, we had budgeted $4,000. We're already at $4,500. So there's a little time left to bid on items. Let's see if we can get that up to like $4,800 or maybe $5,000 by the end of today. Congratulations, you're doing great.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I am very, very, very proud of all of you for your participation in the auction. That's amazing. Our call to worship this morning is called Come Into This Place, and it's written by Rebecca Edmiston Lang. She writes, come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where ordinary is sanctified, where the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together we make it holy. Now let us worship together. So we light our chalice this May morning in honor of all those who have gone before us. We light our chalice this morning in honor of workers around the world who knew ahead of their time that to rest is a human right. May we honor their memories. I invite you to join me this morning in speaking the words of our affirmation, printed in your order of service and up here. Love is the doctrine of our church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth. Thus do we covenant together. Please rise either in body or in spirit and join in singing our opening hymn. It's number 346 in your gray hymnal, Come Sing a Song with Me.
Mind, and I'll bring you hope when Come, walk in rain with me. Come, walk in rain with me. Come, walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come, share a rose with me. Come, share a rose with me. Come, share a rose with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
At this time, I want to ask if there are any children present in the sanctuary today, that they come and they sit on the floor in front of our chancel over here. And I see we have some of our teens that are going to be honored today. I'm going to ask the teens that are going to be honored to stand up here, please.
So today we mark a transition, not only in the lives of these young people, but also in the lives of their families. You all will be changed in the coming weeks and months. The bridging ceremony is a rite of passage from youth to adulthood. A bridge leads to another place, another experience, perhaps another whole life. And a bridge also connects us back to the place where we start from. This bridge is like a thread holding us, holding the youth to their friends they leave behind and to the world they are also entering as adults. We, as the congregation that has nurtured them and watched them grow, now formally welcome them into our ranks. Many will be leaving for college or maybe for some other great adventure, some experience in the world. So this bridge will also connect them to Horizon, their home church, wherever they go, and to this Unitarian Universalist faith that has been their spiritual home.
And I wanted to echo what Reverend Meredith told you, that this ceremony is both an invitation and a hope. And we are inviting you to remember, as you spread your wings, that your roots are here. And we hope you will return to us often, because you are dear to our hearts. And now I would like to present the bridgers to you. And we're going to start with Henry. So Henry is in the middle, wearing green. So Henry's parents are Renee and Eric Esses. He's been active in the past at Horizon in children's classes, Our Whole Lives, the comprehensive sexuality curriculum, which we call OWL, and is part of our coming of age class of 2020. And Henry, I have a favorite memory of you. It was when you were participating in online COA when the pandemic hit in March 2020. And you remember how we had youth group outdoors? I just remember talking to you so much about college football and wrestling. I learned so much from you. And I feel like I really bonded with you over sports. And so that was a fond memory for me. And let me tell you a little bit more about Henry. He is interested in wrestling, football, camping, video games, music, vinyl records, and most recently, learning to skateboard. And Henry is most proud of taking AP classes while balancing wrestling and playing football. And after high school, Henry plans to attend Austin College in Sherman in the fall, and he is looking forward to studying abroad and finding research opportunities in physics. Right, Henry? The next bridger I'd like to present is Alyssa Lagrone. Alyssa is the daughter of Dawn Lagrone. Alyssa took part in our children's RE programs, our OWL programs, traveled as a youth on the Heifer Ranch Service Learning Trip, and is part of the Coming of Age class of 2020, and will be joining Horizon on the Boston pilgrimage this summer. And so Alyssa, when I think of you, my favorite memory of you is from our trip to Heifer Ranch. Well, first of all, I remember how much you loved all the farm animals at Heifer Ranch, but I also remember how you got along with everybody, and then how you kept a cool head when that giant bug was crawling around our shelter, like around our sleeping bags and everything, but you managed to keep it together. Thank you so much for that. Alyssa's interest in high school involved doing Aikido, which is a martial art, and also art. And she's very, very proud of achieving a black belt in Aikido, isn't that correct? And awards in art. And she also says she took too many AP courses. And once again, Alyssa's just really proud of the way she balanced all of that while studying and doing sports. And so, what is Alyssa doing after high school? She will be attending Trinity University in San Antonio, and she hopes to major in psychology. Our next bridger could not be with us today, but I want to direct you to the screen. This is Seth Patakondla, and Seth's parents are Menaka and Bhaskar Patakondla. Seth was part of our children's education programs and also involved in OWL. He helped also to construct some of the boxes that are in the community garden. And I often taught Seth when he was younger in our elementary classes. And I remember Seth being a fan of history, and he also knew a lot about the Bible. And so I remember him being able to set Bible stories in like historical context, and I think we all learned a lot from Seth. It was really great. So Seth is very involved in band, and he played the B-flat clarinet and contralto clarinet at Hebron High School for 4 years. And he was the section leader for his clarinet section. And he was most proud of the fact that his band won first place at the state UIL competition and won in the top 3 of the National Bands of America competition. And they also got invited this past January to participate in the Rose Bowl parade in Pasadena, California. And after high school, Seth is going to travel with his high school group into Europe, and then also he'll be attending the Colorado School of Mines in Golden, Colorado, and he hopes to major in aerospace engineering. And I want to present our last bridger, Phoebe Pollock. Phoebe's parents are Shelley and Caleb Pollock. Phoebe has been active 2 separate times in our program, once when you were very little, before my time, and then when you returned to the Dallas area, you were active in our OWL programs and as part of the Coming of Age class of 2020. And so I was one of Phoebe's Coming of Age advisors. And I remember how mature your answers were in Coming of Age, and that when we started fundraising for the trip that never happened, that how organized you were, and you got everybody organized in the kitchen for our lunch fundraisers. And I know these skills will take you very far in life. And so Phoebe is very, very interested in theater. And when I asked what she is most proud of, she said, I've been in theater for 4 years and started as an assistant costumer, and now I'm head costumer. I've costumed 6 shows, and my favorite one was Frozen. And so, plans for the future? Phoebe is going to be attending Utah State University in Logan, Utah, which is just north of Salt Lake City, and will be majoring in landscape architecture. And she would like to focus on sustainability and accessibility in public spaces. So I'm going to ask, we are going to present some gifts to you, but please stay on the stage. So first of all, there are roses. And with the roses, you might recall when we dedicate children in Unitarian Universalism, the roses are stripped of their thorns to protect the children. But now the roses do have thorns, so be careful. And it's to show that you are now becoming adults. You'll be experiencing some of life's trials and tribulations, but that also you have lots of resilience. And next are boxes. On the inside of the boxes, there'll be a chalice to light your way in the future and notes of well wishes and congratulations from the congregation.
You who are before us today have grown beyond the children you once were. With each new day, you learn more about yourselves, your world, your loyalties, and devotions. The wisdom you have gained in our free faith will serve you well on the journey before you. So now I invite the congregation to join me in raising your hands like this as you're willing and able in a posture of blessing. Today, we honor the youth among us and recognize you as the adults you have become. Today, we share in your journey and encourage your discovery as you move beyond and maybe away and hopefully forward. For your many gifts, for your vision and your energy, for your questions and your challenges, we welcome you. For the hopes you bring and the worries you share, we welcome you. As you join the community of adulthood, we give you our blessing. Wherever you go, remember that you always have a home here, and remember that you are beloved upon this earth. May it be so. Amen.
Today, you take your place beside us, perhaps to leave again soon to pursue your life's journey. Our hope is that these small gifts will be meaningful to you and remind you of us. May this church and this faith ever be a home to which you can return. Thank you for witnessing this moment of transition in our young adults' lives this morning. And feel free to also join the Bridging High School seniors in the garden afterwards for a short reception. Teens, you're welcome to, the youth advisors are here, you're welcome to be dismissed when we dismiss the children, and they'd love to look at the boxes with you and talk to you about what's going on in the future. So at this time, we're gonna sing out our teens and our children, but first, let's give our Bridging class of 22 a round of applause. Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and we'll sing out the children.
We come now to the time in our service where we share our gifts, and this morning is our Share the Plate offering Sunday. So we are honoring this Sunday the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, but we are also specifically supporting their efforts to support Ukraine. So this is a little bit of language from their website. The Unitarian Universalist Service Committee is firmly committed to supporting communities already facing oppression as they flee from Ukraine. The institution has committed to partnership, to building trusting relationships with grassroots organizations, supporting communities facing injustice. They're committed to welcoming communities, preparing and mobilizing congregations in the United States to sponsor asylum seekers and refugees fleeing the violence. They're committed to collaboration, to working with fellow funders to pool resources for grassroots groups, organizing for positive change in Ukraine in the medium and the long term. They're committed to changing the narrative, to challenging and dismantling disinformation and misinformation about asylum seekers and refugees, and reframing the narrative around displacement and its impacts. And finally, providing resources, connecting asylum seekers and refugees with legal representation to navigate the immigration process, whether in the U.S. or in the nations surrounding the Ukraine. So please give generously as you are able. Thank you. Our first reading this morning is called The Word by the poet Tony Oakland. Down near the bottom of the crossed-out list of things you have to do today, between green thread and broccoli, you find that you have penciled sunlight. Resting on the page, the word is beautiful. It touches you as if you had a friend and sunlight were a present he had sent from someplace distant. As this morning, to cheer you up and to remind you that among your duties, pleasure is a thing that also needs accomplishing. Do you remember that time and light are kinds of love, and love is no less practical than a coffee grinder or a safe spare tire? Tomorrow, you may be utterly without a clue, but today you get a telegram from the heart in exile, proclaiming that the kingdom still exists, the king and queen alive, still speaking to their children, to anyone among them who can find the time to sit out in the sun and to listen. We come now to the time in our worship service that we set aside for meditation and prayer. We'll begin with a time of shared silence, hear a spoken prayer, and join in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. I invite you to join me now in a moment of silence. Loving God, Spirit of life, mystery in which we live and move and have our being, draw near to us this morning and hear our prayers. We give thanks this morning for the chance to be together, for the chance to slow down, for the chance to find some stillness this morning, if only for a little while. Our showing up here this morning is a part of taking care of ourselves and of one another. Today, on this, the 1st of May, help us to lean into the changing of the seasons, the coming of summer, and all the newness that may bring. For many, like our Bridgers this morning and their families, there is joy and also hints of sadness at the change that may lie ahead. Spirit, this morning, let us remember the words of Rose Schneiderman. The worker must have bread, but she must also have roses too. May we be reminded of our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all people. And let us turn that eye back on our own selves too. Let us take time to rest, to simply be, to soak in the beauty all around us, in a world that tells us that our worth is determined by all that we do. We know that around us, both near and far, there is so much pain in the world. There are so many of us that are hurting. Help us to move toward a lens of compassion for ourselves and for one another, that it may become the language of the world. For all these things and those left unspoken in the silence of our hearts, we pray, today and every day. Amen. I invite us to join now in singing our responsive hymn, number 123, Spirit of Life. Please rise, either in body or in spirit.
Our second reading this morning is by poet Wendell Berry. It's entitled X. Whatever is foreseen in joy must be lived out from day to day. Vision held open in the dark by our 10,000 days of work. Harvest will fill the barn. For that, the hand must ache, the face must sweat. And yet no leaf or grain is filled by work of hours. The field is tilled and left to grace, that we may reap. Great work is done while we're asleep. When we work well, a Sabbath mood rests on our day and finds it good.
So it is a new month as of this morning, and our theme for this month is nurturing beauty. I interpret that as leaning into the joy of spring, the beauty we may find in our relationships with one another, and thinking deeply and critically about why it is that we find certain things beautiful. So we'll talk more in depth about all of that in the weeks to come. But this morning, I'm trying to honor the beauty in slowing down and trying to encourage us all to do a little more of that. I've been thinking quite a bit lately about the nature of work. Some of you will know that I've been at a virtual conference all this week for transitional ministers. And during our opening address on Monday evening, our UUA president, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, very kindly expressed both her care and concern for us as ministers. Because as you may know, many of us are leaving UU ministry, with similar trends being reported across all religious traditions. This is for many reasons. For one, I've noticed that no matter what we think on our best days, we remember on our worst ones that we really cannot do anything alone. We need support from our friends and families and loved ones and colleagues and from the leaders of our congregations. And the past 2 years have been incredibly difficult with the constant shifts in expectations and the ways that we do things. We know, too, that hurt people hurt people. And there has been a lot of hurt all around the world. In the words of Holly Near, that I think some of you will know, there is hurting in my family. There is sorrow in my town. There is panic in the nation, and there is wailing the whole world round. So we are burning out in a major way. And I'm here at the other end of the spectrum, new and still energized. But one thing that I noticed was the overwork of my colleagues and myself at times. Many of us weren't taking our supposed time off, running around trying to keep all of these balls in the air. And I want to be doing this for a very long time. It's hard when the work is work you love, that feeds your soul. But living a spiritual life in a world that would much rather you do otherwise is a practice in and of itself. We must take time to pray, to sit in silence, to make room for something larger than ourselves to speak. We must take walks, watch sunsets, and look for the little pieces of the divine in a world where there is so much to be angry about, where there is so much hopelessness. Much has been said over the past few years about trauma, about grief, about burnout, but it is so much harder to pay attention to these feelings within our own selves. Especially for those of us in caregiving professions, we focus on how we might help others rather than how we might take care of ourselves. The hard truth for ministers, and really for all of us, I'm using my own experience, but I know that so many of you are in the same positions, is that if we don't learn how to slow down and to let ourselves rest, that we will not last in this work for a long time. And if we don't learn how to adjust our expectations of one another, of our tradition, and our souls, we may not survive. You all know that this topic is dear to me, and I've preached before on the importance of rest. I did it in one of my first sermons when we were still virtual completely and before we really knew each other. But what you may not know is that reframing expectations of ourselves and especially of one another is both part of this interim work, and it's also part of healing from the collective trauma and grief of the pandemic. Things will never be the same again, and though we may be hesitant to acknowledge that reality, I have taken a vow to tell the truth with love, and I intend to keep it. So it is in that spirit that I come to you this morning with words on May Day, the shifting of the seasons and the celebration of the dignity of work and setting boundaries around it. So to begin with, the end of April and beginning of May since ancient times has been a time of celebration, mostly focused on the natural world. The Festival of Flora was a celebration that happened in Roman times, celebrating the Roman goddess of flowers, during which crowds were pelted with beans and with the flowers that we would call bluebonnets. In Gaelic culture, April 30th marks the celebration of Beltane, which translates to lucky fire, as I understand, a celebration which blessed the cattle as they were moved to their summer pastures. The idea was an honoring of the rebirth of nature after the coldness of winter. And so with both of these celebrations, we're marking some kind of shift into a season where things are growing, and we are exclaiming joy at the beauty in nature. As we heard in the Wendell Berry poem Steve read us earlier, by our 10,000 days of work, harvest will fill the barn. For that the hand must ache, the face must sweat. And yet no leaf or grain is filled by work of ours. The field is tilled and left to grace, that we may reap. Great work is done while we're asleep. When we work well, a Sabbath mood rests on our day and finds it good. So this is saying two things. One, we are not in control of nature, lesson we need to learn. And also, we cannot do anything without the appropriate balance of work and rest. In much more recent memory, May 1st was chosen as the date for International Workers' Day by leftist, socialist, communist, labor activists to commemorate the Haymarket Affair and the struggle for an 8-hour workday, something I think we now take for granted and maybe have let slide back into more than 8 hours. And by the way, the Haymarket Affair is quite a tame name for something so violent. No accident, in my opinion. In this country, after the Civil War, there was a time of rapid expansion. So this is the time that many of us have read about where the horrors of industry resulted in child labor, injuries, people working themselves literally into the grave, while the men at the top amassed huge fortunes. And this is also when many religious leaders created what's called the social gospel movement, based on the idea that we as people of faith have a responsibility to be in solidarity with others, because what impacts one impacts us all. When the threads in our interconnected web are pulled, we all feel it, as we've seen again and again. So we can see this social gospel movement today in movements like the Poor People's Campaign, or maybe more locally for our church through our work with Faith in Texas and their work around mass incarceration and affordable housing. So back to Chicago, particularly during this time after the Civil War, it became an industrial center. New immigrants to this country were employed for as little as $1.50 per day. The average American worked 60-plus hours per week, with Sunday being the only day off. But Chicago also became a center for labor organizing because the conditions were this bad. And so in October of 1884, a group of labor unions gathered and voted that May 1st, 1886 would be the date which the 8-hour workday would become the standard. So activists and advocates knew that this would not come easily and prepared for strikes. When May 1st finally arrived, striking workers around the country chanted the phrase, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. So on May 3rd, during a strike, one person was killed and several injured as police intervened to protect strike breakers and intimidate strikers during a union action at the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company. So this was part of a national campaign to secure the 8-hour workday. To protest police brutality, labor leaders called a mass meeting the next day in Haymarket Square. And that gathering was pronounced peaceful by the mayor of Chicago, who attended as an observer. After the mayor and most of the demonstrators departed, a contingent of police arrived and demanded that the whole crowd disperse. And at that point, a bomb was thrown by an individual that no one could ever positively identify, and the police responded with random gunfire. So 7 police officers were killed and 60 others wounded before the violence ended. Civilian casualties have been estimated at 4 to 8 dead and 30 to 40 injured. So in the aftermath, the scramble to determine the maker of the bomb, big businesses rushed to support the police, and the trial that followed overshadowed all the demands of the workers, and working conditions returned to the way that they had been, without any thoughts or limitations on work hours falling away. However, despite all this, the Haymarket Massacre became a rallying cry for activists worldwide to improve conditions for workers. This is one of so many acts of violence endured by those who fought to secure our basic rights that we take for granted today. And we can say, oh, obviously this was wrong, that people were working and living this way, obviously this was wrong. But we also need to understand that conditions like this still exist today. In the words of Adrienne Marie Brown, whose writing has guided me through this year, we are taught that our truths are disruptive and that disruption is a negative act. We are taught that only those moving towards profit can and should create disruption, and everyone else should remain silent. That idea, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will, is all-consuming. When work is all-consuming, we really don't have time for anything else. To be with friends and family, to rest, to make meaning of the world, to make space for silence, for another voice to speak to us. And when we aren't allowed to do this, we also can't function as well. Our inherent worth as human beings can feel diminished. It can feel like you don't have a chance to be a person. We are taught that our value is in what we can produce, and emotions impede that production. American culture, of course, too, still lives in the shadow of the Protestant work ethic, the idea that we all must be disciplined, work as hard as we can, be diligent, keep going, even when we're too tired to do so, and that frugality is next to godliness. But we know that rest is holy work. As I said earlier, I was at a virtual gathering this week with other transition ministers, and one of the themes of our time together was that we are learning again how to be in community. We expect things to go back to how they were before, because we're humans, and that's what we do. We cannot help but have expectations. But the before doesn't exist anymore. So we must relearn how to trust ourselves and one another. In the words of Adrienne Marie Brown, trust people, and they will learn how to trust themselves. In the Hebrew and Christian scriptures, there's so much emphasis on resting in the divine. Maybe for some, rest means to trust, but I think it can also be about taking a break from the exhaustion of daily life and trusting that we don't have to do it all ourselves, or maybe about knowing that somehow our exhaustion is understood on a deeper level by someone besides ourselves. I've shared with you before that one of my favorite stories from the Bible is the story of Elijah, where he's tired and dismayed at the direction his life has taken, and he cries out to God. And God is basically like, you are going to sit down and you are going to rest now. And he makes him take a nap. And then an angel comes and brings him some food. It's kind of like with toddlers when they're so tired, all they can do is scream, and they just need to nap and maybe have a snack in order to be able to think clearly. We are the same. We are the same. So though I think we all know that we have to slow down, that we need to honor the history of those who have come before us, I think those are all things that we already know on some level. But what I'm suggesting is that this lens, this way of looking at the world that values human beings over production, that values relationships over being right, this is the way we need to be looking at the world if we want to be in good relationship with each other as a church, as human beings, as people who are part of a community, and as people who are part of a movement. And this is not a one-time lesson. This is a lifelong lesson, something we will always be learning and forgetting and relearning again. There's a sign that hung in the home of Grace Lee Boggs that read, "Building community is to the collective as spiritual practice is to the individual." And Adrienne Marie Brown elaborates, "Being part of movements is complex work. It requires a faith." So in the words of Aisha Shillingford, there's a saying from Islam and the Quran that have taught me how to think of nature as an influence. If only you relied on Allah a true reliance, He would provide sustenance for you, just as He does the birds. They fly out in the morning with their stomachs empty and return in the afternoon with full stomachs. So Aisha writes, "This influences my organizing by reminding me that we are not the absolute progenitors of our outcomes. We put in the work, we fly out, and we have an intention: get food, end racism, change society, get free. And we work hard. We look for the worms, and we build our nests, and we fly in formation. But at the end of the day, we have to believe firmly that there are forces of justice and truth and love at play. We do our part and rely on the greater power of the universe, our collective intentions, and our efforts. It's relieving to know that it is not always up to us as individuals, but there is a complex interconnection of power at play." So as we begin to close our time together this morning, I'm thinking about that idea from the Quran and wondering if there might be some freedom in the idea that we can try as hard as possible, but at the end of the day, we are not really in control. The image that comes to mind is of a river flowing the way it will. At points strong and mighty, and at other points slow and shallow, trickling. And it continues to flow, however it will, despite all that we do. And so maybe it would be wise for us to lay down for a while and allow ourselves to rest. May it be so. Amen. I invite you to rise, either in body or in spirit, for our closing hymn, "There's a River Flowing in My Soul."
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me
We extinguish the flame of our chalice today, but not our mission to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. This we do because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world. So, my friends, as we go forth from our time together this morning, my prayer for you is that you allow yourselves to find balance so that it may sustain you for a long, long time. Go in peace.